We saw this as an opportunity to really begin and continue a conversation between the community and whoever will end up holding this position about the importance of really starting a dialogue about the issues that are most important to our community and really building that relationship between the folks here and our new police chief and the force as a whole about the ways that we can partner together, what we find to be the most pressing issues, and how we could really begin to address those from the ground up. We're going to have opportunities for us to ask some questions. We also have some representatives from a New Vision leadership, some of our youth here to even ask questions of our candidates. And we'll also have the opportunity for you to participate and begin this conversation. So again, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Ravis Martinez, to talk a little bit about our survey feature.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming out tonight, everyone. This place should be packed. I really want to start with that. This place should be packed. As you know, the selection of the next police chief for the city of Lafayette is a critical role for public safety and really for just the well-being of our community. As Dr. Malloy stated earlier, we've had challenges with really keeping the position filled. And we know that the community's input is really critical and important to ensuring that we get this right. So one of the things that we wanted to do to make this a little bit more interactive and so we can really get some information was we created a survey, really a community survey focused on asking the police chief certain questions. If you look at the screen here, the folks that are attending with us tonight, if you look at the screen, if you can whip out your phone, there's a QV code here that'll literally take you to a short 10-question survey and also give you an opportunity to provide a question that you want asked of the candidates tonight. We'll be looking at that data and asking questions from the 50+ respondents that we've already gotten today. So we started this survey a little bit early this morning, really just to try to get some input from the community. We're excited to offer these candidates to the community. As Christy stated, my name is Ravis K. Martinez, the president of the local branch of the NAACP, and we're really committed to ensuring that you guys, the public, have an opportunity to engage. With our charter, it's a closed process. The mayor president, he or she actually selects who that person is. Yet we feel that your input, our input, is critical to ensuring we get it right. We're going to go ahead and kick this off and ask some questions of the candidates. And the first thing we're going to do is give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to the community. And I'll start with Mr. Brian Ordway.
All right, thank you. Well, thank everyone for being here. My name is Brian Ordway. I'm a lifelong resident of Acadiana. You want to grab that? I need to. Lifelong resident of Acadiana. Married to my beautiful wife of 23 years. We have 5 sons. Their age ranges from 22 years old to 1 year old. I'm a devout Christian and deacon with a passion to serve the Lord and do his work. My professional career starts out as a United States Marine right here in Lafayette. I was at the reserve unit here in the Lafayette area. I served honorably and retired after about 22 and a half years of service. Additionally, I retired from Louisiana State Police. I'm also a business owner of a small driving school called Top Cop Driving Academy. And look, the list goes on. I'm an educator at the collegiate level. I have a master's degree in criminal investigation, currently working on a PhD in criminal justice with a concentration in leadership. I serve on a variety of civic organizations ranging from the St. Landry Evangeline United Way, the Evangeline Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a member of the Ville Platte Rotary Club. I applied for the Lafayette Police Chief position because Lafayette is like home to me. It's a wonderful city of culture, diversity, and a whole lot of possibilities. I'm a life student of law enforcement. It's what I enjoy. It's my passion. In my pastime, I'm reading about law enforcement programs and different ways to help people. So had some friends come up to me and said, "Hey, Brian, you should run." And those friends lived here in the Lafayette area. They said, "We really think you can help." Prayed about it a very long time. Spoke to my wife about it and made the decision to apply. So here I am. I thought to myself, started here in Lafayette as a reservist, volunteered here in Lafayette. I was the director of Toys for Tots for many years here in the Lafayette area. I patrolled the street as a trooper here in the Lafayette area. Attended church here several times. We shop here, we pay taxes here. And now I have a son that attends college here in Lafayette. So thank you for having me. Thank you for showing up here. I really appreciate it. And I hope we can answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Yes, sir.
I'd like to start. My name's Dorian Brabham. My name's Dorian Brabham. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for coming, Dr. Malloy, Mr. Ravis Martinez, and to just extend and echo what Dr. Malloy said, that community engagement at this level is very important. And me being here, I believe it'll represent the type of open engagement that I'd like to have with the community when I'm appointed as your next chief. I am a long-term service member at the Lafayette Police Department, and thank you for your service. And like Mr. Ardewain, I also served in the United States Army, where I obtained the rank of Staff Sergeant as a military police soldier, both stateside and overseas. And within the Lafayette Police Department, I have rose to the rank of Police Sergeant, where I'm currently serving as the Desk Sergeant, and additional duties I have as the Assistant Commander of the Emergency Services Unit, which we're in hurricane season and we can see what's going on down south in Florida. That unit assists with saving our citizens from natural disasters. And since day one joining the Lafayette Police Department, I'll add that this was my ambition to be the chief of this organization. And my record will reflect that. I have attended many hours of continuing education and strategic management, attending the FBI LEADA, the National Command and Staff College. And then the most recent, I graduated from PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum for Executive Strategic Management and Law Enforcement. I've worked in all 4 divisions in the Lafayette Police Department as a patrol officer and also as a supervisor. And I will be humbled to serve as your next chief of police. Thank you.
All right. That's a great introduction. Definitely appreciate those comments. And as we go through this forum, guys, we're going to really be asking some serious questions, and we're also going to be peppering with some not so serious questions, just to make sure we move it along. So some of these questions for our candidates, they'll be kind of rapid fire. They'll be really quick, like, hey, what's your favorite color? Or, if you have a dog, those kind of things. So we'll bring that to you too. But our first question is really something that's seriously the reason why you're here. There's been a lot of turnover in the position of Lafayette Police Chief in recent years. How would you bring stability to the role, both with the police force and with the mayor president or the administrative office? And I'll start with you, Mr. Ardewain.
So what I would say is, for me, the number one thing with kind of bringing cohesiveness would be to ensure that you have a impeccable link of communication. I think for the life of me, the community and the police chief, it's like a marriage. And in order for a marriage to work, you definitely need communication. And then after that communication, the individuals need to listen. And I always said that there's 2 ways to listen. You can listen to respond, or you can listen to understand. And and I would listen to understand. There's always a story behind why things happen. And I think oftentimes we make decisions and we move in a direction without getting the history of what that is. And so the final thing I would do is I would try to find common ground. I would try to find common ground with the mayor president. I would try to find common ground with anyone in the community that I speak to. So through listening, through communication, and through finding common ground, I think that would build a stability within the police department, and I think that would build stability within our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
There's been a lot of turnover in the position of Lafayette Police Chief in recent years. How would you bring stability to the role both with the police force and the mayor president's office?
I'd like to start by adding that in my tenure at the Lafayette Police Department, there have been 5 permanent police chiefs there, and that's over 20 years. And history has a tendency of repeating itself over and over again. We see that around. And the longest standing chief in that organization came from within. The last few chiefs were outside candidates, and there's nothing negative about any of those gentlemen that I'm going to say. You can't pull it out of me because I don't have anything negative to say about any previous chief that ever stood before me. But I will say that the advantage that I have with building those relationships, and it's building and it's compounding on what already exists between myself and the members of the Lafayette Police Department and myself and the mayor president's office, is that there's no learning curve for me. I know the strengths and weaknesses of the agency. I've worked in every department within that agency. I know the men and women who need to be in what positions within that agency. So day one on the ground, I'm ready to go to build on the relationships that I've already made with City Hall, to build on the relationships that I've already made with the men and women at the organization and the men and women in the community as well. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, moving right along, let's jump to another question. Lafayette has experienced an increase in violent crimes recently. What can you do as the police chief to help reverse this trend? You start first, yes, sir.
Me?
Yes.
So in solving crime, and anyone who's ever served in any capacity in the criminal justice system can tell you that there's always a stem root issue. And looking inward into the violent crime that I see in Lafayette, the 2 major issues that we're going to face are family violence and drug-related offenses. So when we want to look at solving the violent crime, we first deal with the issue that is surrounding the violent crime. And over the past 60 months with the increase in violent crime, I can tell you what's occurred. There was a partnership that we bridged years ago with the Sheriff's Department that had to do with the Metro Narcotics Unit. And the men and women that served in those units were a combined effort between major law enforcement players within the Lafayette Parish, the Lafayette region. And that dissolved, and there's been the increase in violent crime has occurred. So day one, I'd reach out to the sheriff, and I would bridge that relationship back. The more officers and the more resources we can allocate to dealing with the issue, the root problem of one level of violent crime, that we can put dealing with that problem itself, will have a detrimental impact. And the second piece is key, is family violence. Years ago, the Lafayette Police Department established a partnership with the Faith House and the Family Justice Center of Acadiana, where we actually had a dedicated family violence investigator. And we still investigate domestic violences as they come in, but having someone specialized trained in domestic violence and dealing with family violence is key. And that'll be the second thing I do. I'll bridge that partnership back, and we will establish another family violence investigator at the Family Justice Center to deal with the survivors of domestic violence. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Brian, I'll restate the question. Lafayette has experienced an increase in violent crimes recently. What can you do as police chief to help reverse this trend?
So the first thing I would do is I would really need to assess the situation to kind of see where these violent crimes are occurring. When I did a little research on Lafayette Police Department, I noticed that there is a deficiency in officers. So the first thing I would do is I would really need to come up with a good recruitment plan, and that will work at the same time as me building relationships with other police agencies. But I think it's not just police agencies. I think violent crime affects so many of us here in Lafayette that we really need to establish partnerships. We need to get out in the community and we need to talk to some of the churches. We need to get out in the community and talk to some of the civic organizations and find out kind of what they know. Again, we have to figure out what is the root of the problem of violence. We have to get out and find out where can we implement the resources that we have, where can we develop additional resources so that we can ensure that people are getting what they need. Oftentimes when you sit and you talk with folks that's either been a victim of violence or that's been involved in violence, there's a common denominator. And whether that is the family at home or whether that is just some trying times that individual is going, oftentimes they revert to violence because they feel like there's no other choice. And so what we need to do is we need to try and figure out where can we provide the resources for folks that don't want to move to the acts of violence. What I would do is again, I would establish a relationship with churches. I would establish a relationship with the community. And together, I think that we can lower the amount of violence that is occurring in the city of Lafayette. Thank you.
All right, excellent. I just want to follow up. Dorian, you stated about the partnership with the Sheriff's Department and, and also the Faith House. Well, what do you think was the major, deterrent? Was it money? Was it a funding issue that stopped these partnerships? Or why don't we have these now?
So I can't speak directly about the dissolving of the Metro Narcotics Unit, creating the two separate entities. It was initially funded when you dealt with the Family Violence Center. It was funded on a grant, and I'm glad you mentioned that. When I was a police corporal, I saw the need for the funding of that position, and I reached out to the Office of Violence Against Women, and at the time, we did not have the resource available to fund that position fully. So the Office of Violence Against Women in Washington, D.C. submits grant applications. And I applied for, out of thousands of projects, they awarded 44 projects nationwide that year. And I was able to obtain $250,000 in grant to fund that position. And so we'll continue to work through grants. And even if the grant money is not there, family violence is important in Lafayette. And to have someone, again, dedicated to that position, I felt and I do feel strong enough about it, that that's one of the positions we need to put back in, whether the grant funding's there or not. And I don't know what happened to to dissolve the Metro Narcotics Unit. I wasn't there at the time in narcotics, but I can tell you that the work that those men and women did was detrimental to the drastically impacting violent crime.
Thank you.
Thank you all for both answering that question. On a related note, in addition to seeing an uptick in violent crime, we've seen an uptick in crime amongst juveniles. What can you do as a police chief both to help prevent juvenile crime and also treat in a compassionate way juvenile offenders? And Brian, we'll start with you.
So, uniquely enough, I work with juveniles all the time. As the owner of a driving company, I have real in-depth conversations with students with regards to responsibility. They share with me things that are going on in school. They share with me things that are going on in their lives. And what I've found is that families are just really, really busy. And although I consider myself not to be that old, I can remember a time where things were a little bit slower and we didn't have access to a lot of the things as far as technology. So what I would tell you is, as a mentor, right, of juveniles, I recently won the mentor award from the Youth Challenge program. I think that's where it starts. I think we go into the community and we really try to find out kind of what's going on. And listen, a great place to start would be establishing relationships with the school system. A great place to start would be working with the schools to eliminate some of the truancy issues that we have, because a lot of kids are not in school when they should be in school. And in most cases, if you look at statistics, what happens is if an individual doesn't receive an education, a basic education, don't know how to read or write, the chances of them being incarcerated is significantly above average. So, that's number one. We really need to find a way to connect the link between the truancy issues that we have, as well as trying to get kids educated and keep them in school. And the last thing I would say is, and I know I go back to this a lot, it's just because that's where my heart is. I really think we have to establish partners with the church. I think we have to establish partners in the community with fraternities and sororities. I mean, there's so many folks that can offer assistance. I just think that they just need to be asked. And I think together we can drive down juvenile crime. A lot of these kids just need mentors. They need somebody to talk to. They need somebody that they can look up to. They need to be exposed. And I think we fall short in that. I think the police has a responsibility not only to protect, but they have to serve the community. And I think oftentimes what happens is, in many organizations, you're trying to use the same mind that broke the problem, right? The same mind that broke it to fix it. And sometimes you just need an outside look. You need somebody to come in and look at it from a different perspective, because no matter what, when you read the story, you read it the same way every time. So I think that's what I bring. I think that's what I bring to reducing juvenile crime.
Thank you, Brian. And to repeat the question for you, Dorian, what can you do as a police chief to address the issue of juvenile crime and also treating juvenile offenders compassionately?
So, looking at how we respond to juvenile crime today, our school systems are full of SRO officers. We have an SRO in Lafayette Parish in nearly every school in the community. And if you look what national trends are happening in major universities, which we can look to for that, for good common practice, they're moving away from the traditional police look. The students in our schools don't need to look for, and this is one thing I agree with Mr. Arderwin on, they don't need to look up there and see someone that will commonly they associate with as opposing force. Every time the police are recognized, they don't need to be seen as a bad person. So, the uniform is set to say this is a police officer. They're coming to deal with an issue. So we can start by just changing the look of a police officer. And I always reflect back to when I think about what an SRO officer is. I always think about, and this name maybe resonate with some of you, I think about Thaddeus Sykes. He's a lieutenant with the police department and long-term member with the SRO program. So you have to reflect on how he responded to the students and how he impacted the students. We could not go a place in Lafayette without someone saying, Officer Sykes, I remember you. You were my SRO. So when you talk about the gold standard, it has to be Thaddeus Sykes. And what he did different was he took away the badge. You would see Thaddeus in the community without his uniform on, attending events, so that people said, that's Mr. Sykes, that's Mr. Thaddeus, not always officer. So I would think that, and you hear this term a lot, beyond the badge. So our SRO officers need to be beyond that badge. They need to be seen as humans. And how we humanize that is interacting with these children on a level outside of just being called every time that someone needs to be disciplined and so forth. And what that is, and even Ed Washington and other officers from the initial phases of the SRO program, they stayed after school. They coached teams. They took off that uniform. They put a whistle around their neck. They said, we're going to interact with them on a different level so that we're not always seen as someone just coming in to take you to jail or to enforce crime. And then once we do that, relationships are important. Once we build these relationships, these children will interact with us, and we can collaborate with the programs that they have, with the Boys and Girls Club. We can have after-school programs to give them something positive to look for.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. All right, guys, rolling into the next couple of questions, we actually invited a couple of youth from the community with New Vision Foundation, and they'll actually introduce themselves. But I wanted to really include the youth, as we just stated and talked through a little bit about the increase of youth violence, but really wanted to understand how our youth themselves see the police and interacting with the police. So we'll ask our speakers to come up and ask the question. I know they're a little nervous, guys, but we're going to get it done. Thank you.
That's how it starts.
Good evening. My name is Nala.
Let's make sure your mic's on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nala Thomas. I'm the spokesperson for New Vision Leadership, and I'm here tonight to ask. I'm here tonight to ask a couple of questions to our candidates here. The first question I would like to ask is, this year, Lafayette Parish School System has adopted a clear book bag policy in response to school violence. This seems to be a major strategy, a minor strategy, to address a big problem. How would you address the school shootings issue to make our community schools a safer place? Mr.
Hardaway?
Mr. Hardaway.
All right.
Good.
So first and foremost, thank you, and I think it takes a lot of courage to get up here. So thanks for your question and what you're doing. So I agree. School shootings is a very big problem. Clear book sacks it's not necessarily a solution, but it assists in just keeping a visual aid, keeping some visual eyes on backpacks. I mean, quite honestly, most folks are not going to put a gun or anything in a clear book sack to begin with. So I don't completely understand the ideology behind that, but they are trying to do something. Look, I think that a lot of the students who bring guns to school, a lot of the kids, with the school shootings that they've had, all of these kids had some form of mental health issue. And I think what happens a lot of time is we can't wait to resolve some of these issues at school. Like these issues and knowing your community is probably vitally important. I mean, because as big as Lafayette is, it's really not that big when you get to know people in certain communities. If we're being honest with ourselves, we know the people that are selling drugs, right? Collectively, we know the people that have guns. I talk to students all the time in my driver's ed class, and I talk to the kids that I mentor. They know. The only reason they don't tell us is because they don't trust us, right? They don't want anybody to. If a kid knows another kid has a gun, he doesn't want that kid to go shoot somebody and he be responsible for it or she be responsible for it. But until we establish a relationship with students, there's nothing that's going to be done towards we can fix it. So first thing we would need to do to try to minimize school shooting and eventually just stop it altogether is those SROs that are on campus, they should know those children. They should mentor those children. They should be the ones that spend enough time with these kids to know not only what they're doing in school, but perhaps what they're doing after school. I think what that'll do is that'll give us a little bit of leverage to maybe bring in some other resources. A lot of kids do what they do because they're not empowered. When you give a child a gun, they get a significant amount of attention and they become empowered. And they thrive off of that. We have to give them empowerment by kind of doing what we're doing with you. Instead of giving them a gun, give them a mic. Let them talk to some people. Let them get applause for some of the things that they've done well. And it can't start whenever they're juniors or seniors. I mean, these things, and again, I'm going to go back to the church because this is not something that I fake. I think it's remarkable when you have a kid singing in front of a choir, right? It's probably the only place that they can be horrible and everybody's going to still clap when they get done, right? And when they clap, that instills some confidence in that young person to get back in front of a group of people, and then they're proud. Right now, a lot of kids do what they do because they just don't have the pride. They just don't have the resources. They just don't have anybody at home. And police officers in today's world, they are so much more, and they have to be so much more than somebody that rides around in a police car. They have to be so much more than somebody that carries a gun. They have to be so much more than an individual that writes a ticket or works a crash. I mean, you should be able to communicate with people whether you have a uniform or a badge. I mean, you should be able to communicate despite that. Like a police officer, a good police officer is a good police officer with or without a badge. So when it comes to our children, I mean, essentially what we have to do is we have to get to know them at their root. We have to get to know the source. And then once we can establish that, honestly, I believe that the kids are going to tell us what's going on in the school. Because I know most kids, most teens that I've talked to, and I've talked to thousands of them through driver's ed, they don't want that. They're just too afraid to tell folks what's going on. And my son is in here today and he says, man, when a police officer stopped me, even if I didn't do anything wrong, I am scared. I'm like, why? Why are you scared? And he's scared because of what he's seen on television. He's scared because he's not interacted with police. That's why he's scared. We have to interact with folks. That's how, and it cannot start. I'm going to repeat it. You can't start. It has to start when they're young. I can remember as a trooper going to my kids' school and some of the other schools. They were in kindergarten and first grade, and I would read a book to them every week. I'd go in uniform. I'd read a book. When they would see me in Walmart, they would say, Mr. Bryan. And I would say, hey, do you remember that book? I don't know if y'all remember this book. It was a book called Morris the Moose. Okay, I might age myself when I say that, but it's a book that they absolutely loved. And even today, I have students that are 22, 23, 24 years old will still remember the story of Morris the Moose. So that's how you stop violence in the school system.
Repeat your question.
How would you address the school shootings issue to make our community a safer place?
And there was a piece, just so I can get it, there was a piece about the clear book pack as well. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. This year, the Lafayette Parish School System adopted a clear book bag policy in response to school violence.
So, and I'm going to repeat back to the question with our SRO unit. If my calculations are right, the Lafayette Parish School System, we probably have one of the largest SRO units in the state. With the dedication of the Lafayette Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, the Scott Police Department, we put officers, some schools, the larger schools, we have 2 officers, and some schools, the elementary schools and everything, without giving operational security, there are several officers that interact with the children on a daily basis. So about the school violence piece, and the clear backpack piece is going to go in line with that. The policy was put in, I believe, according to the newspapers, simultaneously about the time the school shooting happened in Uvalde. Because the parents, everybody in here is probably parents, or you have a niece, or you have a nephew, and they wanted something done immediately. They wanted to see something. What can we do immediately? And the clear backpack is what was come up with. It was probably a common practice. I've seen it doing security assessments at places like Stuller and at casinos. They mandate that their employees bring clear backpacks in, just for a visual of what the person's carrying on their property. And will that stop a school violence? No, it won't. What'll stop school violence from occurring is men and women of the Lafayette Police Department there to stop people from harming our children. And that's what they're there to do. And it's not always the student. We're there to protect those students. The recent shootings, they're not students from inside the school. They're perpetrators and murderers coming from outside into these campuses to harm our children. And that's what we're there for. And that's what we're gonna do. So when we talk about stopping school violence and school shooting on school campuses, that's what we're going to do. We've been doing it for years since the SRO unit's been established, and we'll continue to do that because the data's not there to say that every school shooting that occurs is one of our students. The students are there to learn. We as educators, we as their parents, we as law enforcement, we're there to make sure that they have that environment to do that in. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue that practice. We're going to continue to put brave men and women in your children's school to stop these acts from occurring. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll hear another question from one of our youth from New Vision.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Naya Thomas.
Let me help you. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Naya Thomas. I'm 16. I'm a junior at Acadiana Renaissance Charter Academy.
All right, and you got a question for our candidates?
Yes, sir.
All right, what's your question?
What is your position on teachers in the Lafayette Parish school system being trained and authorized to maintain a firearm in selected classrooms?
Okay, did you guys hear that out there in the back? Okay, so we're gonna say that one more time, really loud. One more time. Come on, I'm right here with you. I know we're a little nervous.
School has become a very scary place. What is your position on teachers in the Lafayette Parish school system being trained and authorized to maintain a firearm in select classrooms?
Okay, so Dorian, I think you're first.
So I'm not an educator. I don't pretend to be. I've taught in police academies across the state and in the military as well. But I'm not an educator. I'm not a school teacher. But I have many friends who are. And I've asked this question: what do you think about an educator carrying a firearm in the classroom? And the educators I spoke to about it, they don't want to carry a gun. They don't. So I would have to defer that to the experts, to the men and women who are educators, about if they want to carry a gun or not. I can't answer that question from my standpoint because for the last 25 years, I've carried a gun for my profession. And a gun is probably not the only answer to stopping the violence that occurs in school. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Can you repeat the question one more time?
What is your position on teachers in the Lafayette Parish school system being trained and authorized to maintain a firearm in select classrooms?
So, Mr. Dorian said it best earlier. Teachers are there to teach, right? They're trying to keep a safe environment in the classroom, and I am an educator. And while I'm an instructor with the NRA on concealed carry, and I have been shooting a gun probably as long as I've been around. I don't think teachers carrying guns are the answer. I just don't think it's the answer. I think that there's so many other things that we can do to ensure that school safety is a priority. A teacher carrying a gun is not the answer, because I think it's going to expose us to all kind of other things that we're going to have to try and do to ensure that additional safe measures are taken to make sure students, I mean, what happens when a student overpowers a teacher, right? Having guns on campus, I don't necessarily know that that's the answer, particularly a teacher carrying a firearm. Listen, you know, the issues with school violence, and I've said this before, I just think there's not the right communication. We have to communicate with these kids. We have to talk to them. We have to find the root of the problem. We have to talk with our teachers on campus. Sometimes teachers, they'll communicate with the students. They do things for a student that other people may not know, and they build relationships. What we want as police officers, not to be the bully of the campus. Because I can assure you, when a student on school campus gets tackled by a police officer with a gun, the likelihood of those students going to talk to that police officer on campus, it's not going to happen. He becomes the individual on the school campus that's a bit intimidating. So there's other ways. There are times where we must be aggressive. But oftentimes we can eliminate a lot of these issues by simply just communicating with our faculty and staff and trying to ensure that we have measures put in place to ensure school safety and that kids can learn what they need to learn while they're in school. Thank you.
All right.
So I just want to say thank you all for everyone who's taken part of the survey so far. We've gotten some really good questions that have come in, and really appreciate your feedback on that. And so some of them overlap in some ways with some things that we've already asked since we've been up here, but I do want to draw on one of the questions that was submitted by our audience members. You have to work with a lot of different kinds of people as police chief. You got to work with other police chiefs from around the parish. You got to work with the sheriff, and you've got to work with the mayor president. How are you going to build those relationships? And really importantly, how do you make sure you're not getting undue influence from the sheriff, from the mayor president, from other police chiefs? How do you maintain that balance? And Dorian, I'm going to start with you first, please.
I've worked with the agencies for the past 20 years. I served with several of the police chiefs in the area. You have Vance Olivier from Broussard. We worked for 20 years together at the Lafayette Police Department. Many men and women at the Sheriff's Department are interagencies. So some of them start at the Lafayette Police Department. Some of them have changed from other agencies to rise through the ranks and obtain leadership. I believe it's a open line of communications, and as long as that channel is open for both way information, feeding and giving, the balance is easy. You just put the citizens of Lafayette first. That's all you have to do, and it makes everything else just clear out of the way. As long as your intent is to better serve the citizens, and everything else just washes. So I think that to open those channels of communications is key. I think they're already there with my history in this area, with the men and women of these agencies. I think it can expound and be better. And again, I just go back to what I said. Every decision I will make will be driving to make Lafayette the safest urban community in Louisiana. And as long as I keep that as up on you, if you have a vision board, as long as that's your vision, the safest city in Louisiana, the hub city, then I think I'll get that collaboration. I'll get that buy-in from all the chiefs and the sheriff, the mayor president, because that's what we all want. I mean, when we join law enforcement, when we join civic organizations, we want our community to be known as the best. That's why we do it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And Brian, same question to you. How do you build those relationships with the other police chiefs throughout the parish, with the sheriff's office, with the mayor president, without having that undue influence coming from those other offices on you?
So, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, and what I would tell you is the undue influence that sometimes we struggle with has a lot to do with what your vision is and who you put first. The reality of it is the number one reason that people become police officers and people serve in public position, at least when they talk in forums like this, is for the people. And I think you kind of have to remove your own personal agenda and your own personal goal and just focus on what you want for the people. I think what happens is balance comes from communication, as I said before. Balance comes from listening to understand. I've been in law enforcement over 20 years. I've worked on the academic realm of research. I've worked in corrections for a little while. And I think when you establish those relationships with some of these outside agencies, which many of them I've worked with, Sheriff Beckett Bro and I have worked together. Chief David Anderson out of Karen Crow, we've worked together. I mean, I know those individuals, and we've had great relationships before. So I have no reason to think that whenever I become the next chief of police of Lafayette, that we're not going to have great relationships when I get there. I think essentially you communicate with them, you listen to understand where they're coming from and the progress that they made, and then you see how you can insert yourself to help move Lafayette forward to a safer, better community.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And now Ravis will talk a little bit.
Thank you, guys. Excellent questions, excellent comments so far. And guys, you guys are going to have an opportunity to ask some questions here shortly. What I'm going to do is just kind of, like Christy said, we put out a survey. You guys have participated. We've asked the public to participate. And we've gotten a little under 50 responses. And we've asked questions, so we've asked folks to submit questions. And literally one of the questions Chrissy just asked was four questions came in of that exact same theme of, building relationships, being independent, how are you gonna get the job done in this political environment. Another question here, and I'll just read it, as police chief, what type of community relations program would you incorporate into your administration? What would you consider a community review board to examine citizen complaints? And secondly, are you familiar with 21st century policing policies that were recommended under President Obama? If so, what reform issues and strategies would be considered a priority? So that's a long question, so I'll just recap. As police chief, what type of community relations program are you implementing? How are you going to involve us, the public? And will you consider, a standing community review board that will really look at citizens' complaints and have some teeth? And we'll start with you, Brian.
So so to answer the one of the first questions is, yes, I am familiar with the 21st century community policing, which President Obama established. And one of the main components of that criminal justice reform policy or document, he talks about communication, he talks about where to put assets. He talks about grants that are available. Some of the committees I think that need to be established in the community would be sitting down with the leaders of that community and establishing what the concerns are. And I think you do that by involving pastors. I think you do that by involving teachers. You do that by involving other people in that community. And it goes back to just kind of communicating with them, see what the issue is. But then when you see what the issue is, see if they have a solution. See what they think would resolve their issues. Because oftentimes, you don't always have to be the guy with the idea. There's plenty of people out there that have great ideas. They're professional in their community, and they may come up with something that's kind of compatible or something that you can use to help better a specific community. Because one thing I'll tell you is we don't all have the same type of problems. One community may have this kind of problem, another community may have a different kind of problem. So we need to apply each committee for that particular area. So I think that's what you do with regards to building community relationships. You establish a basis on what that community needs for that particular community, because Lafayette is a fairly large community, and I think there's plenty of people out there that will be willing to volunteer their time and help make their community a better place.
Okay, I'm just going to push you. Do you consider or would you consider a community review board? Yes or no?
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly something that we want to talk about. I would like to know we would have to talk about the specifics of a community review board.
Okay.
Often, and I don't want to go too far down, but oftentimes what happens is this is just another means of communicating with the chief. It's just another mean of hearing from the people with regards to what are their concerns, because not everybody is articulate enough to explain what's going on with them. And that's why it's important to have somebody, maybe like a community review board, to kind of look at some of those issues and maybe explain it to you for someone else's well-being.
Okay, thank you for that answer. To you, Dorian, I'll repeat the question. As police chief, what type of community relations program would you incorporate into your administration? Would you consider a community review board to examine citizen complaints? And are you familiar with 21st century policing policies recommended under President Obama? If so, what reform issues and strategies would be considered a priority for your administration?
I'll start with the review board question, if I may.
Sure.
So I think that it goes in line when you talk about our citizen engagement and review boards, when it talks about police use of force, about police discipline. I think that we need to expound upon what we already have in existence with our civil service board. And our civil service board, a lot of people don't engage with it that much because it's at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? And that's when everybody in this room is at work. And how the civil service board is comprised of, it does have a member of the police and fire departments. But there are 3 citizens from our community that's on that board. And those citizens are put on there by council appointment, by representatives from the university, and so many other resources. And those citizens have a vote. Those citizens already can vote whether that the discipline that the chief handed down needs to increase up into termination. That citizen review panel that already exists today can investigate an officer from a complaint stimulated by a civilian that comes into that panel. So maybe that's the key. Maybe we already have a citizen review board here. Maybe it's just that we're not using that tool the best of our advantage. I'm not saying the citizen. I'm saying maybe we're not. That's a board, and when people get voted to put on that board, they have real power. When citizens of Lafayette get selected and voted by our city council to hold that seat, they have power. They make a decision. Their vote counts in there. Their vote outweighs the municipal employees. There's 3 citizens and there's 2 employees. So that's where I'll go with the citizen review panel. And to build upon the community relations, this is something that's near and dear to me. I put that in my vision statement on a piece of paper that I put down in everybody's seat. If you look at it, the last sentence, we'll get there by a community and neighborhood policing model. I was there at Lafayette Police Department when we first started our first community walk in 2016, and that board was comprised of men and women from the city. It's the citizens board that still exists today, the community relations board. And now that's bridged to 3 different law enforcement agencies in our parish. The Lafayette Police Department, where the home base, that's where it started at. The Lafayette City Marshal's office and the Lafayette Sheriff's office. Now, we do really good jobs of going through neighborhoods and interacting with the students, interacting with the community members. What we need to expound upon, that program is phenomenal, but we need follow-up and we need follow-through. So how about something we can call it, whatever you, maybe after the walk. What happens after the walk? Maybe going back in that community and dealing with the informal leaders of that community. You don't have to be a council person. You don't have to be in charge of a Rotary Club or a neighborhood. Just, you could be the gentleman sitting on your porch and you want community engagement. I shouldn't have to pay a membership for that. And we'll come and interact with you. Once I'm appointed chief, we'll establish an after the walk program. And we'll come into your community. You don't have to come to our police department. You don't have to drive. We'll meet you wherever you want, and we'll discuss what you want to happen in your neighborhood. I always think about the motto of the military police. It's of the troops for the troops. And I'll expound that to, once I'm the police chief in Lafayette, to of the people for the people. Because we as police officers, this is our community as well. We live here, we shop here, and again, I can't echo it enough. When I'm the police chief, this will be the safest community in Lafayette. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We're almost done with our questioning, and then we're going to have questions from you guys if you want to ask some. on the screen, you probably can't see it, but you can see some colors and shades. And I'll just talk a little bit about this question to the candidates. The new police chief will need to balance competing priorities as the Lafayette Police Department provides services to the community. We asked the community to pick what are the top 3 potential priorities that the community believes that the police department should, make top priority. And the number one, 53% of folks said that we need to hold officers accountable and our staff accountable. The second highest vote getter was strengthening the relationship between the police and the community. I think we talked a little bit about that. And the third one was reduction of crime, or crime reduction in 42%. Can you speak a little bit about, from your perspective, and I think we're starting with Dorian, if I'm not mistaken, on, what do you feel would be your top 3 priorities? When you get the job, as you stated, what are you going to concentrate on? Knowing all that we've discussed and the issues before us, what are you looking as a police chief to do? What is on your vision board as your top 3?
So I always think about what am I going to do when I'm the next chief of police? Oh, I don't know how they got down. I'm sorry. Okay. And of course, violent crime is on everybody's mind. We see it every day on the news. Somebody shot, somebody stabbed, somebody robbed. Secondly, is going to be staffing. When you look across the nation, it was just on the TV about New Orleans Police Department. They're so drastically understaffed that they're having to push people out of administrative roles onto the road to respond to calls for service. And at some point, they're calling it a crisis on law enforcement. And when you speak to police chiefs across the country, that is what they're looking at. Their priority is staffing. And the reduction in staffing will show an increase in crime, because there's not the patrol officer riding around through the neighborhoods anymore, because they're going from call to call to call. So when you ask my top 3 things, violent crime, neighborhood and community policing efforts, and staffing, I would move with those 3 things.
Violent crime, neighborhood and community policing, and staffing. Got it. All right, Brian, I'll repeat it. The new police chief will need to balance competing priorities as the Lafayette Police Department provides services to the community. What would be your top 3 priorities as the leader of the Lafayette Police Department?
So my top 3 priorities would be staffing, because I think that just across the country, one of the biggest issues is police come on shift and they are running from call to call to call. We did it with the state police. We came on shift, and there's not much time for a whole lot of enforcement. This is why a lot of agencies want to enact task force to go and be proactive towards violent crimes, because the officers that are out there are just not able to go out and provide the policing initiative that they need, because they're tired. Or you have one officer call in and you have to rearrange the entire shift. I mean, I can remember as a trooper having to carry 3 parishes, 1 trooper, and so it was a strain. So for me, my first priority would be staffing, trying to ensure that we rebrand how we recruit for Lafayette Police Department. And in that rebranding, I would want to work in a much more diverse police department. And when I mean diversity, I don't mean just black, white. I mean black, white, brown. I mean men and women, young and old. I can remember taking a leadership class, and they said that if you really want to impact change, you need 3 things. You need 3 generations of people. 3 generations of people. You need someone that's older, you need someone that's a little bit younger, and then you need the younger generation, so that you understand who you're policing out there. So staffing and recruitment would be probably my first priority. with that, I think comes I would say training, just making sure. I mean, because we talk about training a lot right now, but what we don't do is we don't talk training and education. Oftentimes people don't realize they're totally different. You can have a guy on the force that is trained and skilled and know how to take somebody down and do all of those things, but he doesn't have the theory behind why he has to do it. Why does it work? Why do I need to switch from being aggressive to maybe handling it this way? And I think we need some training on mental health. We deal with a lot of folks that suffer from mental health illnesses. And I think that it's very important in this day and age that it's long past due that we address those issues. So training would be the second priority. And then, just trying to reduce crime, right? I don't think you will ever rid an organization or rid a community of crime. But I do think that you can get a handle on crime and you could manage it. I think crime can be managed well. I think you can reduce crime. I think you can prevent some things. But I think the biggest, the top three things would definitely be, staffing and trying to ensure that, staffing, recruitment, and making sure that we reduce crime.
Okay, thank you for that. Guys, we're going to move into our last phase, which is you guys asking any questions that you may have. Just know that we've got some great data. We'll be sharing this data from the survey with the community. We asked folks what the biggest challenge that the new police chief will have to deal with, and a whopping 82% of folks that responded said that public trust in the police department was number one. So building that public trust in the police department was number one. And then it turned to stability and morale in the police department as number two. And then lastly, the third came in with relationships with city, parish, elected officials, and non-public city staff. So those are some important things. Guys, we have a mic up here. If you have a question that you want to ask the candidates specifically, please come up to the mic and ask your question. And we'll ask that you just ask one question if you could, just for the sake of time, and introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Christy Green. I'm Christian Green. I'm with the League of Women Voters. And I have a question about what for me was a sort of traumatic civic event. I mean, as a citizen of this country, this state, this community, sometimes images are sort of imprinted on your brain when you see something traumatic. And so for me, that incident was watching the video release of what happened to Trayford Pellerin. As our district attorney, Don Landry, stood by, stone-faced like a statue, and I'm still not sure what's worse, what I saw in the video or his demeanor. But as I watched that video, I saw someone who was standing in a gas station convenience store, kind of in a corner. I knew there was a knife there, and you could kind of see a knife. That looked a little strange, but he seemed to be sort of rocking and agitated, someone who clearly had some mental health issues. And I kept wondering, because I knew what the end was going to be, when is he going to do something that justified what happened to him? And I waited and waited for that to happen, and then I saw him run out of the gas station and be descended upon by police, tased several times, I think, and ultimately killed in what looked to me like a hunt. So what can we do to avoid anything like that ever happening in this community again? What needs to happen with police training, de-escalation, mental illness? What is it? What needs to occur?
Excellent question. I forgot who was first, guys.
with Brian.
I'm sorry, Brian.
So thank you for your question, and that's a great question. I too saw that video. As a police officer, it's very difficult out there on those streets. You go through all this training, and then you encounter a situation, and you hope that muscle memory kick in, and you're able to subdue someone without bodily harm. I think it goes back to what I said earlier. I think that there's a problem out there with mental health. I think there's a problem out there with drugs as well. And I think that just like you wouldn't shoot anybody that was ridiculously drunk on the side of the road, you know, I think what needs to happen is, you know, officers need to ensure that they get mental health training. There were several things. I could Monday night quarterback that whole incident for you all day, but I'm not going to insult the officers and what they did. You know, they could have used rubber bullets, right, to stop him. I think the bigger issue is it goes back to communication. I think it goes back to training. I think it goes back to knowing your community. I always, you know, and when I conduct training, I always ask folks, if that was your brother or your sister that was acting the way that that individual was acting, could you pull the trigger? What would you do differently for somebody that you actually know, your brother or sister, your mother or your father? What would you do differently if it was them? And most of the time people say, well, I know them, so I know what they're going to do. So when you're dealing with folks that have mental health issues, when you're dealing with individuals, you know, that you know something is not right, having the right training, being prepared for those types of incidences, I mean, it's something that we have to have. So to prevent that, to answer your question, to prevent that, we need training. We need training on mental health. We need to make sure that our ambassadors in the community, I mean, because the video, it went a long time while they followed him. You know, there were so many different things that could have potentially been done, but I wasn't there. So I don't know. And I'll tell you, sometimes video footage can be deceiving, right? And I'm not saying that this situation necessarily deceived us, but it can be deceiving. And it's very different when you're an officer out there, because our training tells us if anybody comes near you within 21 feet with a knife, you know, that you have a right to protect yourself. So those are the things that are going through officers' head, and we must remember, folks, that a lot of people that are police officers that are on the street, you know, they're 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 years old. They're young men and women with limited exposure to life oftentimes. So we just have to make sure that when we give them the responsibility of protecting and serving our community, that we also give them the resources to be able to do it effectively. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Storm?
So we will first acknowledge that any loss of life in any community is tragic. Everybody does suffer. No matter what the ultimate outcome is, everybody does suffer. And my fellow candidate did hit a lot on the high points. One thing that I will say has changed since then, to get direct to your question, is there's a gentleman sitting in this room right now that mandated that we have training, even to the point of taking, and that's Councilman Lazard. He mandated it. He said that we have to have mental illness training and mental health training through ICAT. We have to have more tools at our disposal to deal when someone's suffering with a mental break, and it's not always going to rise to the level of lethal force. And when officers are properly trained to identify these things, that these men and women are suffering from drug abuse, from mental illness, then we can better assess that situation. So I go back to the council. The council did a wonderful job by allocating us the funds to outfit every officer with the munition that Mr. Ardoin was talking about. Every officer that responds to a call for service now has those less lethal rounds available to them, and they didn't have them at the time. So training is important, and I'll go back to legitimacy, trust, those pillars of the 21st Century Police Report that came out. You know, we need to be trusted within our community. So when we respond in whatever manner that the ultimately outcome is, that the men and women that we serve say that, you know what, they did what was necessary at the time. And then that's how questions get raised from, and that's how they come about when we're in the community. Questions about, did they do everything that they could have before that happened? It's when a trust occurs. Now, when breakdown happens, that's when those community liaisons that we create, those community relations boards, the men and women within the community says, no, I know that officer, because we are from the community. When they say, I know that officer, there was nothing malicious in his heart when he did that. So to answer your question, we're better trained today than we were before that incident happened. We're better equipped today than before that incident happened. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Keith Falk, concerned community activist. This question is like one question, but two in one. Before I ask the question, I want to say that the chief of police is he appointed by the mayor president and serves at the pleasure of the mayor president. So whatever plan or whatever program you try to implement, it would have to align with the mayor president. How will you ensure that there is adequate minority representation in the police department? With the firing of Chief Glover, it was stated that the police union had something to do with it. Will the police union influence any of your decisions?
Good question. I think we're starting with Dorian.
Now, I mean, the police union is a benevolent organization within inside of the police department, and their main focus is to obtain raises and get better benefits. They don't have any collective bargaining agreements or any kind of contracts, so there'd be no deciding factor in my decision making as it relates to the police association.
Okay. Right.
The first part being, oh, okay.
Minority representation.
So minority representation. That's a great question. I served as a police recruiter for over 3.5 years. And within the organization, we went from 11.5% African American minority candidates to over 25%. And we are a CALEA certified agency. So you have to show that you are attempting to attract minority candidates within your organization. And that is a goal. Because in order to have public trust, whenever the citizens, whether they be white, African American, Asian, Samoan, Southeast Asia, whenever they look at our police department and they make it up of the 305 officers that represent their community, they should see themselves in there. So it should be a mirror. So our police department should be a mirror. It shouldn't be slighted one side or the other. So as police chief, when I'm appointed police chief, my efforts in recruiting will be that, as they held when I was in recruiting, to mirror our community.
Thank you. Brian.
So first, I'll talk a little bit about recruiting. So I was a Marine Corps recruiter for the Lafayette area for about 4 years, about three and a half years. I was actually the site commander here in Lafayette, and I ran recruitment for New Iberia and Opelousas and some of the surrounding offices. Recruitment, I mean, and really think about this, because when you recruit for the Marine Corps of all branches of service, which is considered to many the elite, the hardest, longest boot camp, and so on and so forth, you have to sit down with parents and you have to develop a level of trust with them to where they don't fight you every step of the way for their child enlisting into the service. I don't think it's much different here. Right now, the reason, I mean, look, honestly, I think the reason why, there's a couple of different reasons why people are not wanting to become police officers. You know, I personally think that being a police officer is still an honorable profession. But we've had so many incidences in the course of the last 10 years that most kids that I talk to, and I say kids, I'll say 15 to 20 years old, say I would never be a police officer. I would never, ever. And you ask them why, and they say, I don't want to get shot at. I don't want to. But if you ask people about being a basketball referee, right, or you ask them about being an umpire, right, you know, they don't mind doing that. I think going out into the community and talking with folks about the work of police, I think setting the example, that's how you're going to get people to come and become a police officer. Historically, the African American community has not had representation in police force. That has changed drastically over the last 30 years, drastically. And I think it's going to get better, because the responsibility of keeping your community safe doesn't necessarily just belong to the police. It belongs to you too. And so being a police officer, I think, is the safest way and most honorable way to keep your community safe. So what I would tell you as far as recruiting, that would be one of the things that I work on my rebranding. As I rebrand the concept and the idea of becoming a police officer, you know, I would work on going into talking with females, talking with folks of a different sexuality. You know, I would talk with anyone and let them know that we share responsibility in having a safe community. And the other part of the question had to do with the police union, I think is what you said, right?
Yeah, the police union.
No, I think it's really important that the police chief understands what the police union, because the police union is advocates for police officers, right? That's what the union is. They're an advocate of police officers. I think it's important that the chief understands, because just like the community won't always come to you as a police chief, neither will some of your officers, unfortunately. And so the police unit is very important in making sure that there's balance out there. Will they influence my decision? No. But look, I am looking, and I'm not beyond some levels of compromise. I'm very goal-oriented in trying to establish what we need to keep a safer community, to make sure our children can go outside and play, to make sure we can sit on the porch and have a good time, to make sure that we can work and provide for our children. So I'm very goal-oriented. So I don't get stumbled by things that takes me off my course of action. And I'm going to require that of my officers. I'm going to require that of anybody that's associated with me. And I'm going to work tirelessly to make sure that I give the people what they deserve, and that's safety and respect.
All right, thank you. Next question.
How you doing? I'm Andres Lando. I'm a retired policeman with Lafayette City Police Department. When I initially heard about the forum, I was excited about coming and speaking to some of the candidates for the chief position. I wanted to ask questions like, how will you handle racism within the police department? Because, of course, you won't be able to treat your citizens right if there's turmoil within the police department as it relates to racism. I wanted to ask, how would you handle pushback from the union? Like this guy said, it's no secret that the union is involved in everything that goes on with the police department, and not in a good way, in my opinion. Like he said, when it came to Glover, the union was involved. When it came to Reginald Thomas and Toby Aguilar, the union was involved. And usually it's the crybaby syndrome. They don't get what they want, even if it's right or wrong. They start pushing back, and they start screaming in people's ears, and they start influencing people to do certain things. I wanted to ask another question. How will you handle a city parish president trying to tell you how police, who has never policed in his life, and not taking the advice of his senior law enforcement official? But I don't want you to answer any of these questions, because I feel like it will put you at a disadvantage, being that that third candidate chose not to show up and have her foot put to the fire also. So please don't answer those questions. But that's what I wanted to ask all three of you guys. But since one decided to drop out for some reason, just don't answer the question. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that statement. Questions, guys, come on. Next question.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Rochelle Nelson. I am the co-chair of a coterie, Macomb Vise Coterie. And my question for you is, if either one of you become chief, would you consider the other person as your deputy chief? The reason why is because we were in that situation, and I say they created it, but the other person that was running, he became the deputy chief. Would you consider that?
I think Brian is first on this question.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
Thanks for your question. And if you guys would allow me a little bit of time. For the gentleman that came up before, oftentimes they tell me thank you for your service as a veteran, and I'm sure he's heard the same. I want to thank you for your service as an officer. I do know that it's just not easy. You know, it's just not an easy thing. Ma'am, with regards to your question, I'm not necessarily sure how to answer that, to be honest with you, because because Lafayette Police Department is civil service. The idea of creating a position, I really think we have to try to look at what we have right now and fix what's going on right now without adding other stuff, other personalities and other things like that. I think that, I know I dwell on this, everyone, but I think when you can find a level of communication and you can find humility. I talk about communication often because I think it's the key. Somebody can communicate with you without even talking. You can look at them and you can say, well, I'm not going to go talk to them because they look like, you can see it. So I think when it comes to, bringing somebody else on to help or hire somebody that's a candidate, I would have to look at the total picture. Unlike this gentleman, I'm not going to sit here before you or the folks that are looking in and tell you that I know everything about Lafayette Police Department, but I don't. I can sit here and tell you that I won't be influenced because as much as I would absolutely love to be chief of police in Lafayette and would do a phenomenal job, I don't have to be chief of Lafayette. I want to be chief of Lafayette, okay? And I prayed long and hard for this. So what I'll tell you is there will be a bit of a learning curve, all right? But one thing I won't have to learn is leadership because I've been a leader for a very long time, right? One thing I won't have to necessarily learn is people, because you deal with a lot of different personalities, and if you know how to deal with people and you act with humility and respect, one of the hardest things to do when you have a position of power is get talked to a little bit rough and not respond in an aggressive manner, right? I'm that guy. I just shrug it off, right? And I'll tell you, I'm that guy because I'm saved, right? It's all about the goal. It's all about the vision. And I'll caveat, and I know we have to move on. I'll caveat off of something that the young lady had. We may have rubber bullets now, and we may have some of the training that we need, and this goes to the councilman, but why did it take a person to get injured before we got it? We have to be visionaries. We have to look ahead at things, and we have to look at some of the things that we need for tomorrow. We can't look at it for today. And I think that's what you'll get with me. I'm pretty much an open book. I look forward to working with the mayor president. I don't know him like you all know him. I've heard stories, but I judge my own character, right? I don't look at what somebody else says about an individual because he may be different with me or not, but I'll see when I get there. Well, I'll end there because I can be a little long-winded, as you can see. All right, I'm sorry.
So The cut and dry answer is Mr. Ardoin couldn't come and be the deputy chief when I'm appointed chief at the Lafayette Police Department. He did allude to the fact that we are a civil service police department, and the deputy chief position that is still there today, if you search our class plan, is only allowed for a sergeant or above already within the organization. So even if my heart was set on it, bringing Mr. Ardoin on board, the law just doesn't permit it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next question.
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Hey, Ms. Margie.
Margie Broussard, community activist, advocate, you name it, I'm it. I'm being cautious with my words, as sometimes I'm not.
Speak plainly.
So some of our sources tell us that Judith isn't here because she is the top pick, and she was instructed not to be here. Okay. And the police union is pushing for her to be the chief because she will not go against a police officer. I'm curious as to how that makes you guys feel that you are here, and expound on why you're here. Thank you.
All right, I think Dorian's first.
So, as the next chief of police, I'll say this. I'm not going to shy away from anything. There's no topic that once I'm appointed as your next chief of police that I'll shy away from. No conversation with any civic organization in Lafayette or outside of Lafayette. I'm not going to talk about a ranking member of the police department because as it sits today, I still am governed by the rules and regulations of the Lafayette Police Department because I serve within that organization today. So, but I will talk about me. I will talk about the leadership that I bring forth to the men and women of the organization. And then as it relates to the police association has recruited over 200 members from the Lafayette Police Department. And to expound upon what Mr. Ardoin said, there are men and women in that organization who represent the body of the police officers. So as a police chief, you will have to interact with the police union. It is just inevitable that they speak for the majority of the police officers within. And they will have grievances about working environment, police equipment needed, pay, benefits, time off. And I believe wholeheartedly that the men and women of the police union, that's what they're there for. And I'll continue to work with them on those topics. But why I'm here is just that transparency to me is utmost important. And the way for me to be transparent with the citizens of Lafayette is when Mr. Ravis and Dr. Malloy asked for this forum, I asked 2 questions just so that it wouldn't violate civil service. I said, is it going to be open to the public? And he said yes. I said, would it violate any political laws that govern civil service that are against our rules and regulations? He said no. So that's why I'm here. I'm here because I am from the community of the Lafayette area. I shop here. My granddaughter goes to cheer here. You know, I work here. I play here. I enjoy the culture. I enjoy the food. I enjoy the diversity Lafayette has. And when I'm chief, all of that it'll come to the forefront because anybody who knows me long enough will tell you that my actions will speak louder than any word that I can say before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
So how does that make me feel? So I don't work for the Lafayette Police Department yet. I mean, I really, to be honest with you, Ms. Broussard, I try to focus on the things that I can control. You know, I'm not going to go down and talk about a fellow officer or the police union or any of those individuals. I focus on the things I can control. The reason why I'm here tonight is the same reason I would be here anytime that you call me, because you asked me to be here. And I want to be here because I want to hear your concerns. I want to answer your questions. And if I can't answer a question that you pose to me, I'm going to try to find the answer for you. Now, whether it's the answer that you want to hear or the answer that you don't want to hear, I'm going to give you the truth. There's going to be situations where, for the greater good of Lafayette there's going to have to be compromise. If you worked in an organization of leadership, there's always some form of compromise somewhere. But there are times where you have to hold your own. You have to stick to your principles, and that's what I'm going to do. I think that being here tonight is so vitally important. And not long ago, we had a similar type meeting with a different organization, and our turnout was a little bit low as well. But that doesn't decrease the importance of what we're doing here tonight. There needs to be more forums like this, and it doesn't need to be just when there's an appointment. It needs to be constant. He said something that was very unique, and I say it all the time. When you have a police officer that's misbehaving, the public knows that. When you have a police officer that does something and people know that police officer, they're going to say he's not that kind of person. That doesn't sound like him, right? What I would say to you on the end is that I'm going to focus on moving the department, continuing to move the department forward. I think Lafayette PD has some extraordinary officers. I think they have a phenomenal police union, and what I know of them, right? I'm the guy from the outside looking in. I don't have a lot of history. I don't have a lot of things that the gentleman next to me have. So I'm going to be unbiased. I'm going to come in with a clean slate, and I'm going to come in open to making additional relationships and building on the relationships that I already have. Right? I look forward to working with the mayor president. I look forward to working with the union. If I am chief, I look forward to working with him. He won't have to be my assistant because he'll still be on the force. And whether he's a captain or a major or a lieutenant or sergeant, or just an officer, if somebody has great input, you have to listen to them, because it's not about you, the individual. It's about helping the community. And I think that's what we're here tonight to do. We're trying to do our part to make sure that the community trusts us. And tonight establishes that we want you to trust us, and we're willing to work towards that trust. Because trust is not just given, it's earned.
Thank you. Agreed. Another question?
Yes. Thank you both for being here. Mary Liv Gercio, retired member of the community, grew up here. My passion and interest in activity throughout my life has been to promote and support public education, because I believe that when people are given an education, then they have opportunities and tools. I see the role of the police chief as being someone who is a facilitator, because the problem of controlling crime or managing it is all of those things. It's working through the organizations. It's making sure that young people have educations. It's doing the preventative work. It's the communication. It's the not only just communication with the people of the community, but communication with all aspects, whether it's the district attorney's office, court system, the city and parish council members. It's a very complex position, and I don't really feel that you can be effective unless you are able to communicate and work well with all of these various parties. At the same time, while you're trying to recruit, you're trying to train, and you're trying to rebuild trust in the community. So my question to you would be, if you agree with this, would you feel that it would be important to try to hold an ongoing group that would be representative of all of these entities that are critical to you being successful in your job, in order to achieve greater cooperation than what we presently have?
Right.
I'll sit down and listen to your response.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, I think that this goes along with the community relationship program, right? It's not only the community, you're right, it's the judges, it's the district attorney, it's probation and parole, it's all of those individuals coming together. And again, if you're just focused, right, if you're looking from at something up close, you can't see the bigger picture. I think it's going to be important to have a successful police organization. You will need input from all the investors, and the investors are going to be the children. I mean, I even think that it's not out of the question to have an organization of children from different areas and let them share their thoughts with you. I think one of my greatest strengths, at least that's what I'm told, is that I'm easy to talk to. I'm very approachable. I find that with children. I find that with everyone that I try to come into contact with. So I agree with you. I think that all of those things are going to be important, and that's something that we're going to establish. You know, one of the things I want to impress, and I know we'll probably get to close, and each of us will be able to say what we want to say, but I'll say a piece of it, right now.
Why don't you hold that, because we're actually wrapping up.
Okay.
So I want you to
All right.
hold that thought.
All right.
So
Perfect.
let's let Dorian answer.
So thanks for the question. I do believe with collaborating with all stakeholders is important to ultimately moving Lafayette forward to being that safer community that I have on my vision board. And whether it be a teacher, whether it be someone from a coterie club, I believe they all need to take part in those community relation boards that we've established. So, and like I said, we did a wonderful job in 2016 establishing those boards, and we've continued that process today in branching out to all the law enforcement entities. But then it stopped at law enforcement, and you're right. So I think that when you want to talk about moving towards the goalpost, is to invite those stakeholders from the education department, invite those stakeholders from the criminal justice department, the 15th Judicial District, the DA's office, and like I spoke about earlier, inviting that piece from the family violence groups, and after the courts take place, because where we do lose it as well is once the offender has been in the court system, then we lose track of that. So ask about the rehabilitation programs, the family violence intervention programs, all of these programs need to collaborate together, because I think at the end of the day, everybody came out tonight because they want the better for their city, and the better for their city is to the people who don't think that they have a voice, need a voice, and that's what these community relations boards will do. And to echo what he talked about the youth, a couple of our SRO officers have said that when they ask, what do you think the problem is? And they said, we're not heard. So we have, it's called the Police Explorer program, but it still has the name police, right? So why don't we have a youth relations board? Expound upon it. We have a Citizens Police Academy. Why can't we just have a conversation starter, and then have those youth and have the educate and everybody just in a collective group with the ideas and what we need, and how would you like to take part in your community? We offer that. Police officers over 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Conversations can happen, and under my direction at the Lafayette Police Department, those lines of communications will be open. Thank you again.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, I'll be brief. Good evening. So I work in economic development in the parish, and my question is pertaining to, so just to give you a little background, I know we're running on time. My job is primarily to help improve our economy and help improve our quality of life through business retention and attraction, and also through retaining our talent, like these two young individuals from New Vision Leadership. We want them to stay here in Lafayette, but I also want to make sure there's meaningful employment for them as well. And headlines about violent crime do not help make that easy. Business attraction, retention, talent attraction and retention. And so I'm curious to know from your perspective as career law enforcement, military professionals, how would you approach connectivity
with the economic development community, business community, young professionals community, from that perspective of protecting and retaining Lafayette as a wonderful place to live, as a place that has an excellent quality of life for everyone, not based on your zip code or where you live. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts about that and any best practices communities that you all have studied that have tackled violent crime in a creative way. We're always looking for best practices in economic development. So,
Thank you. Dorian first.
So the safer community piece. When I first started, you would see police officers on every corner, and staffing is an issue. So, in keeping that young, motivated individual here in Lafayette, we need to make sure that they know that they can connect with the police department, so that we can put that young and impressionable person in a police car to protect our city. So I think when you walk out of your door as a business owner, you want to feel safe, and you want your patrons to come in and patronize your facility. You want them to feel safe as well. And the old officer-friendly type environment where people are walking a beat and they're looking for their call boxes, that's what comes to mind. And I think it's as simple as a window, as a glass that we roll down. And when I talk to people in the downtown area, one of my previous assignments was the downtown patrol sergeant. And there's a lot of economic development that takes place in the Lafayette downtown, from the courts, bakeries, nightclubs, eateries. And it's just the accessible to the police officer. So what we did when we got downtown was we took the police car, not away, we got out of it. And we started walking, engaging with the people, engaging with everybody in that area to make them feel safe. So I think it's key when we talk about making people feel safe is we have to make them see the police officers. And then seeing the police officer is to find that balance between responding to calls for service, which is a priority one, and then putting that officer in your business district so that when you walk out, you don't have to call 911 to get an officer, because that's generally the practice when it takes place in the communities, right? You have to dial 911. You have to tell the officer what you want. Whenever you could, in the past, walk outside and say, hey, I see a police officer, and interact with that police officer. So you don't have to, it's a more connective type of transition of information between you and that person. And best practices as it relates to violent crime. One way that they're doing it in some major cities is with technology. I'm gonna be honest. Shot Spotter. It detects gun violence. It's also they have them downtown where some people are allowing, and of course it's allowing. It's not a force type environment. These real-time crime centers that take place. Our sheriff has one. It's officers 24 hours a day monitoring the cameras so that we can assess what's going on in what places and direct officers to those hot spots that are going on. So when I'm talking about addressing crime, and so it's technology is the future in preventing crime, and putting more police officers in police cars to patrol your neighborhoods and interact with you on a personal level. That's how we reduce the violent crime. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. So with economic development, I think that the police department can maybe look at establishing a relationship with economic development, maybe FBLA in your schools, and kind of bringing students and business owners together. And I know that, in some communities they're doing that now. We just have to make sure that when we bring them together, we establish a training forum so that they kind of know how to behave, they kind of know how to speak, because what we're doing is we're preparing them for the next level. I know one of the things that has worked and that is working is finding businesses out in the community and partnering them with students on an annual basis, whether that's a summer program, but it shouldn't end just in the summer. It's continuous. And some students, you might have a young lady that says, I want to be a nurse when I grow up. But she's never really experienced what that was, and then she starts giving shots, and all of a sudden she can't be a nurse anymore because she passes out every time she gives someone a shot. If we insert her in a program with a partnership with economic development, and how does the police play into that, right? We play into that through our school resource officers. We're in the school, we're dealing with these children, we know what works. You put the right officers in the school, like I believe they have now, they can provide some insight for you to make that connection. So, that's something you can look forward to. Some of the best practices that I've seen is, I know right now LA, Los Angeles, California has a program. It's called the Drone Squad. So they're understaffed as well. And what they use technology to cover certain areas. They usually centrally locate their officers, and they utilize drones from the air to try and find out what's going on and to cover those areas that they generally can't cover just because of manpower. So far, they've found that that's been pretty effective. I think the sheriff's office here has a real-time crime center. I know that Lafayette PD has talked about doing something similar. I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel, or if we should just partner with them and create a joint operations center. I think those are some things that we probably want to look at doing. But as far as students staying here, and there's always going to be the curiosity of going to another place because, people feel like it's better over there. And what I've found oftentimes is people move right back home after they've moved out because they find out that the grass is not always greener on the other side. But if you can help those students and the people of this area establish relationships, it becomes a lot easier. And look, I'll be honest, in certain communities, that's a lot harder than other communities, right? So we just need to make sure that we put our children and we put our citizens, our friends and families in a position to network so that they have the resources they need to stay here, to work here, to make Lafayette a better and continue to improve the economy as well as the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it on the questions, guys. Let's give these guys a hand, please. We're wrapping up. We're literally gonna give you guys 1 minute, just 1 minute, and we're gonna do something different because you're not running an election here, so we're not voting for you. So we want to hear something personal about you. Let us know a little bit something personal. Nothing dealing with this position, nothing dealing with the police department. We want to know about Dorian, and we want to know about Brian, and what makes you unique, what makes you a special person in this community. Leave us with that, because we got all the other stuff. We can leave you with that. But thank you guys for coming out. Once they finish, we'll just say goodbye and be done. But go ahead and start, Brian.
All right. Can I stand up?
You can stand up, move around.
I think so much better when I walk around.
All right.
Only
You only got 1 minute.
Only problem is I talk a long time. So I'll tell you something that you would probably never guess about me. So I would like to believe in my own world that I work well under pressure. So here's what I'll tell you. So my beautiful wife here on the front row, not our baby, but our other son, she was at work, and I said, maybe you should take some days off. You're about to have this baby. She's like, no, I'm fine. I'll be fine. So she works all day at school, and she comes home. She says, hey, I got to go by the doctor. I have an appointment. So she goes by the doctor. The doctor says, well, look, I think you should stay here. She's like, well, I'm going to just go home and get my bag. She calls me. I'm like, no, you should probably stay. So she doesn't. She comes home and goes into labor at home. So and although I've worked on a farm and I know a little bit about cows, don't let the suit fool you. I'd never delivered a baby before. So we jump in the car, we're headed to the hospital, and I'm moving trooper speed. For those of you that don't know what that is, see me after the forum. And so we get there. And by the time we get there, of course, she's going through contractions, and she's like, I'm going to have this baby. And I'm like, no, you're not going to have the baby because your water didn't break. And then we jumped the railroad track, and her water broke. And so we pull up into the parking lot, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get the doctor. So I opened the door for her, and she was like, no, I'm having this baby right now. And so in the hospital parking lot, under an enormous amount of pressure, I deliver a 8-pound, 9-ounce baby in the parking lot. So talk about working well under pressure.
All right, excellent, that's excellent. Dorian.
I don't have anything as elaborate as that. I've never assisted my wife in giving birth to any of our 2 children except waiting in the waiting room. But I can relate to a story pertaining to pregnant women. My children are almost 20 years apart, so we started over. And a crazy thing that happened was my wife and my daughter were pregnant at the same time. So her husband, of course, being in this region, he's in the oil field. So we went to Babies R Us, and I have 2 women, and one on one side of the store looking at a different baby, and I'm going to purchase my first grandchild baby supplies, right, for the outfit there, the nursery. And I'm also going to purchase mine for my son, who's fixing to be born as well. So I'm looking, and then it's confusing everyone in the store because I have 2 women at the same time asking me about, what do I think of this color? Should we do the dark wood or the light? So that was probably about the most inventive story I have about children, other than when we would go places. My granddaughter looks exactly like my beautiful wife, and my son looks just like me. And Costco came to town. They have those dual buggies, so you're pushing 2 children, and they're 2 months apart. It's the craziest thing. And somebody said, oh, look at the 2 babies. And they assumed that they were twins because me and my wife's together, and my daughter's away at work. And well, how far apart are they? And I say 2 months, and a lot of questions. So yeah, that's my baby story.
This might be some of the favorite stories I've ever heard to end something like this before. On behalf of the NAACP and the League of Women Voters, I want to thank you all for spending your evening with us and with these candidates. Although it is an appointed position,
Yes.
You are always welcome to reach out to your elected officials, and a big thanks for Councilman Lazar for being here tonight representing the council. Reach out to your council members, reach out to the Mayor President's office, let them know your feedback and your thoughts and just how important you think this position is for our community. Please help me give a big round of applause to both. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great evening.